So, thank you all for tuning in. This is our conversation with Dr. Mell for the Pink and Purple Tea. As I have explained, for the past 6 years, we've done an annual awareness tea here in Birmingham, Alabama. And this year, I wanted to do something different, especially since some of our followers are in different states and different cities, and they're not able to come or have not been able to come to Birmingham to participate in awareness tea. Also, with it being online, you can also check out the replay and listen to it over and over again versus just a one-time event. If you weren't there, then you missed it. So we just want to do something different to reach everybody across the globe. So I have Dr. Mell with me today. I'm super duper excited. Y'all have no idea how excited I am. Dr. Mell is a blogger and certified life coach whose practice is driven by positive psychology. She is a retired college professor who explores evidence-based approaches to post-traumatic growth. So, welcome, Dr. Mell.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
I am. So I want us to dive in, but I want to ask about your disclaimer first before we get started.
My disclaimer. So, thank you for the warm welcome, everybody out there, and particularly to this wonderful woman. It's just a blessing to be with you. We live apart now, some distance, so I miss her, and I'm a little old-fashioned about it. It's nice to be able to have, share community. But the friendship with you, I just value so much, and I'm so grateful to be with you, and then to share something, that I think we both feel like is so important, and potentially, by the end of this conversation, I think really empowering for women primarily in difficult situations. So my disclaimer, thanks for the bio. I'll pay you the $10 later. I have a lot of people ask me, from the time I branded Dr. Mell online, I had a lot of people in comments sections and my Facebook and ultimately Instagram, that sort of thing, say, so what's your medical specialty? And I don't have one. The doctor part of Dr. Mell is a PhD. I have been a lifelong learner. I am modeled after two terrific role models in my parents, both of my parents educators. And I, even though I am not in the classroom anymore since 2007, which is part of my personal story, I really am driven by the urgency of the message from Dr. Angelou, who taught us, if you learn, teach. So I am endlessly curious about people and places and situations, and I'm always going to be learning. And I think from her and her inspiration and the inspiration of my parents and other people, I learn stuff and I try stuff, and then I share it and potentially teach.
Get along.
That's right. We get
kindred spirits.
That's right. Yes. I aspire to be the terrific community organizer that you are. So there's that symbiosis.
Yes.
So my personal story begins obviously much earlier than 2007, but that professionally is a very pivotal year for me. If you're ready, we'll talk a little bit about my own trauma story.
Yes.
And I can feel myself sort of choking up a little bit. As I shared with you last year, maybe, or 2 years ago, I have just never been prepared to share my story publicly, because I worried, I guess, that in the same way that I'll sort of stuff my feelings and not cry about things, I worried that if I started telling the story, I would just come apart again. In the same way that you think, oh, if I start crying, I'm just going to cry a river and I'll never stop. Two, I'd imagine that, and I'll look back on this like other people do maybe a year from now or how many ever, and think, my healing just had to get to the point that I was ready to share.
Yeah.
So my own story.
But before you
Yeah,
start,
sure.
and then take a deep breath.
Yeah.
But Dr. Mell, every year that I've had hosted the tea, no matter if it was with the organization or with Talk to Tricia, she has been a financial supporter of that. Like buying the food, buying decorations is not cheap. You know, especially when you have no idea how many people are going to come. And so to me, that means the world that every single year, like there's not a year where she hasn't said, "Are you doing the tea this year?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do the tea." Or, "Yeah, we got this plans." In just 2017, I could not do it. As y'all know, after I had my last child, I was hospitalized for heart disease and I was in recovery for 6 months. And so I just could not do it. Like September is when I got cleared. October is domestic violence and breast cancer awareness month. It just wasn't
It wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, it was not going to happen. It did not happen. But last year we did it, and I said there's got to be a better way to do this where it can reach more people, because the stories were so great and everybody felt free. I just wish more people could have been a part of it, and so that's why we decided to do it virtually this year, so more people could be a part of it. But I will let Dr. Mell share her experience of trauma.
I'll add to that we live a state apart now, and that made it a little bit more difficult. But we were going to move heaven and earth, right, to make it happen.
Yes.
I am not a medical doctor, and I'm also not necessarily I was not going to go back after all of those years and the health crisis that I ended up in by 2007 to become a therapist. But I wanted to certify as a life coach, particularly because I was interested in how I was sure that there were methods that were evidence-based that would move people past traumatic situations, particularly domestic violence survivors, from trauma, from being frozen in a state of traumatic pain to traumatic growth. So my own story begins, I would say, about 1982. I'm 60. I was 60 in April, so some time ago, when I meet and marry an ex-Marine with a mean streak. Most of his manipulation and control is from jealousy, is emotional abuse, psychological abuse, but I am also the survivor of physical and emotional or psychological abuse. I get a protective order and temporary possession of the house and temporary custody in 1993, and he, which is probably pretty typical of the way that he would operate, dragged the divorce out 2.5 years to try to drain me financially, that sort of thing, just more hurt. 95 is where we are now. I have my divorce final. I feel safe. I was able, with my parents' help, to protect my home, and within a year, my son is a heroin addict, and I put him in rehab in 96, one tender year later from the traumatic marriage, in his first rehab, first of, Tricia, I'm going to say 5.
Is he in high school?
He was in high school. He was 17 years old.
I think we're the same age. So that's why I was doing the I told you I'm
Yes.
numbers. As soon as you tell me timelines.
Yes.
Dates.
He's now 40. Okay. So but about the, yes, you're right, about the same age. 96. And this is before, as you well know, this is years and years before, 1996, years before there's an opioid epidemic. And it's very hard to talk about an opioid epidemic and there is at least language that we're wrapping around this problem.
And support and this disease and
Yes.
stuff like that. Yeah, it wasn't like that back
no,
then.
96.
No.
He's about 17, almost 18, and receives a dual diagnosis in rehab, addiction and schizophrenia. He had already been diagnosed with some learning disabilities. He will not be diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a form of autism, until he's almost 30. But I can't even so much as take a breath from the trauma that I had absorbed in that difficult marriage before I am now the caregiver for an addict with a dual diagnosis, and so we go to, right, I
got
see.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, got you.
2000, 2001, he leaves out west, and I have given this child life. I can't subsidize his death, and that's what addiction feels like as a caregiver. So,
That's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, but it's part of trauma.
Yes.
He goes out west, and that's where he lives, and he, unfortunately, in 2019, as we sit here, is still living in addiction. So I have had to part ways with someone whom I love, I gave life to, but who lives apart from me, estranged from me. That difficulty goes on well into, I'm going to say, 2015, 16, 17. So let's back up a little bit. That's personally what was happening. I am not sleeping. I'm not taking care of myself. I really move from one domestic terrorist situation to another, in the sense that I have an addict in and out of my home, but in my life, who is I'm just not coping with very well. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm taking care of him and his sister. I have 2 children. By 2007, I can't get to work anymore. I am being medicated for really for sort of depression, anxiety, but it's I have a fibromyalgia diagnosis that's being treated like anxiety, depression, because people really, I'm not even sure to this day that doctors have a really good grasp on how to treat fibromyalgia, but I'm in, yes, yeah. I'm in a world of pain. And we'll mention later in our talk about some really significant work that a trauma expert has done in a book called The Brain Keeps the Score. So, the body keeps the score. That the brain, in trying to process what's happening in a domestic violence situation, and then with a caregiver for an addict, one type of trauma after the other, tries to process this, but the brain, the body all the time is keeping the score. I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating well, I am barely functioning. And leave my work I had done so much preparation for and loved. I had been at the college 20 years at that point to take care of myself. So I slept for a year. I literally, I had to sleep for a year. And then slowly but surely, from my body, and I began to build back a little bit. And in deciding to certify as a life coach, I find post-traumatic growth. So we get there, but I want to say that the way that I get there is with you to find kind of a broader definition for trauma, since a lot of domestic violence survivors, like me, are survivors of emotional or psychological trauma that has as much of a devastating effect on your health and sense of safety as physical trauma.
Changes your DNA and everything.
Yes. You have some experience that from with yourself, with family members and friends you know.
And old friends, and so about? Now you put me on the other side of it.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say now. With me myself, like I shared with you, I've only had that I consider one domestic violence incident, and every woman I've talked to with the teas that we've had that they've shared their story, their mate was charming and swept them off their feet, or they were very decent until like they got married. Like there was no clues.
Or there was some level of permanent commitment.
Yes.
You're mine.
Yeah. And then when they got married, that's when the mask came off. It's like, ooh, I'm so tired that I had to keep this front up now. Let me let you know who I really am. But this particular situation that I went through, like I've always been very observant, and I always like she said, when you tell me dates and years, I start calculating in my head. And so with this particular individual, it started off verbal, where it'd be like, he needed somebody to take care of him. Don't use this word. Don't say whatever. Don't do this. Don't do that. When I call you, I need you to be there. Like I only have so much time. And then it became accusatory, and then just like little tests. Like called me from payphone saying like, oh, I got locked up because the payphone would register the jail even though it was a payphone miles away, and just to see if I would drop everything to come get them. It's like, oh no, I just tested you. I just wanted to see what you would do. I didn't share this either. It was like, oh, I need $200 to see if I would do it. Like, okay, well, let me see what I can do. Oh, I just wanted to see if you would at least try, if you would at least help me out. Like, didn't really want it, but just wanted to see how I would react.
And I think happily for what Tricia had shared with me about this, and this is a dating relationship, is that it didn't get to the point that it escalated to a physical confrontation, thank God, but those tests were to see whether or not, I believe that, that whether or not you were
somebody you could control,
who could be manipulated.
Yes.
And ultimately things would have escalated. Happily you got out of that.
Yeah.
I guess what I'd like to see happen in terms of the definition of trauma is that we move past what I call a triage phase of responding to domestic violence situations, to absolutely continue to pledge to bring women and men and children affected out of dangerous situations with a plan and with some money set aside. But that my concern is when we move a woman, for instance, to shelter, and even when we offer some level of support, as you've said, if you participated in support groups and an opportunity to do role playing with the children and begin to let them give voice to the feelings that they've probably pent up and that sort of thing. I'm worried that we don't spend, I'm sure we don't spend enough resources in any of it, but that we don't have enough, we're not spending enough time and money on expanding trauma response to include the people who, like you in the dating situation, or women in leaving abusive marriages who have endured years of psychological abuse, emotional abuse. We mentioned in the conversation as we got started, before the camera began to roll, that happily Serena Williams, I bet you've seen the commercials on television, Serena Williams is beginning to lend her celebrity and voice to financial abuse. I would like for us to expand the definition of trauma to something broader than a bleeding head wound, so that we can embrace all the different ways that we could support people who find themselves made potentially then in safe situations, but not in supportive situations where there's real post-traumatic growth.
And now I shared my story because, like, the women in your case too, you did not know what you were, the mate that you were going to marry, like who he presented himself to be.
No,
wasn't who you end up marrying. And I feel like if you knew ahead of time, you wouldn't have made that. So I share mine because I saw the signs immediately. So that's why when it did get to, like, he tapped me, he didn't hit me, but that was enough for me. It was like,
yes.
Your intention was you were trying to hit me. So I ended it right then.
It was very, very charming. And he understood. I had a 3-year-old son at the time that we met, and he understood that he was my world, and he would know. There was no indication to start with. He would get in the floor and play with my son, and that was the way to win my heart.
And that's what people ask, like, how did you end up in that situation? You know, like, yes. They didn't show me their true character. Like, in my case, I was lucky that that person showed their true character from the beginning, or I was able to recognize, okay, this person is, manipulative.
Yes.
And then they're also the same sign. And I kind of heard that the male Tauruses are like that. So I just picked up on it, and I was like, somebody, and I had a decent relationship before that, and now with my marriage, like, it's completely different. So I'm just fortunate that I saw, okay, this person's looking to manipulate and use me and not contribute anything to my well-being. And then I lived with my mother. I was in college. I'm like, I don't need to be wrapped up in this. And it's kind of like, I remember I was at the park, like, praying, like, Lord, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? And then a week later, that incident happened, and I ended it right then. But, like, the women who share their stories, and they get married and get abused, their mates did not, during the dating phase and the engagement, did not show them, or if there was a sign, it wasn't that drastic.
No.
There was no
there
test.
Might have been, it feels very, and I was really young and was, I had already had a relationship, a brief marriage that my son was born in, and had limited experience, I think, with dating dynamics anyway. I had low self-esteem. I, in a sense, was contributing to some of this because I was seeking someone, instead of looking within myself, allowing myself to mature and embrace the best parts of myself. I was looking for someone to fill me up. And this is a man who comes in 9 years my senior, who had served in the military and been not around the world, but had more life experience, and fill that gap. But no, there were hurt people. Later on, I discover parts of his childhood that make sense that he is operating from pain, and it doesn't excuse the behavior at all, but it explains how he had gotten to that point, and to a certain extent, my experiences feed that. Very immature, very sheltered. I grew up in a very sheltered
and that's
little
something
community.
Too. A lot of women that I talked to who were in very bad abusive relationships, they never saw that. Like, their parents, never saw their parents fight, never saw anything. And so, I'm thinking, like, well, how do you allow the abuse if you never saw it? That's the one piece that I haven't been able to understand
because
myself.
Because you're charmed into it.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, because you're charmed into it. He's charming, and then that's what manipulators do.
Yeah, but that's the fact that, like, yes, you grew up in pain and you're broken, but you knew enough to be charming and manipulative in the beginning.
That's
to
scary.
trap that person. So it's like, yeah, it helps you understand why that person is abusive or mean or whatever label you want to put onto it, but they know better enough to know that they can't start off like that.
Yeah. Some of the sleep issues, and I hadn't planned to go this far into it, but I'll share this. Some of the sleep issues that I had, so I'm working with a therapist, after 2007, and I'm complaining because I don't have a diagnosis of a sleep disorder until 2009. So I would say I can't sleep at night, and then when and that certainly was true 2005, 6, 7, as my health began to deteriorate. And she said, well, when did most of the abuse occur in your former marriage?
You hadn't told her about the abuse?
I told her,
Okay.
but she said, when did it? And she said, mostly at night. And I said, oh my gosh.
Oh, okay, that's
Yes.
That's
And
a
she
revelation.
said, you're going to, and some of your audience members are going to identify with this really, really strongly. She said, what you are working against is a state of hypervigilance. So, yes, so that even though you're
far removed from it.
you're far removed
Yeah.
from it. In the midst of that trauma, you are trying to relax and go to sleep because you've got to get up and you've got to go to work the next day and you've got to bring children along to school and the responsibilities. You may think you're relaxing and going to sleep, but you are staying in a state of hypervigilance.
That you help
Almost
me,
like-
even though it's not domestic violence related. Larry says all the time, I don't know how to relax, and I'm connecting that with
You're listening for those babies.
Or
It's
not
very
even
much-
that. It's
oh.
things that have happened in childhood and
Oh,
dating
my.
relationships, and I'm like, I'm getting it now. Like when you said the therapist told you that, that makes sense. So okay, I just had a
Yes.
breakthrough right now.
You're
that just
welcome.
helped me.
Oh, it did me too, because I thought, well, no wonder and then I began to take by 2007, like I said, I slept for a year. I'm starting to take very, very good care of myself because I'm not going to allow the issues that I've been dealing with for, at that point, 20 years or whatever it's been, to take me under. I had lost my life's work, my career, where I've had so much joy in feeling like I had made a difference in people's lives at that college, and it was gone. So I was going to build back, and part of it I knew was I'm going to need to rest and restore myself, and it was sleep. So the part that will link back in to the business of how, you're wily enough to know that you're bringing pain into this relationship, but you're going to be very charming and solicitous and calling.
It's
How
like
are
a
you doing,
game.
my daughter? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He would also wait until, particularly my daughter, his child was asleep, and then start an argument. The towels weren't hanging straight or something like that, and light another fire. So
Like, if it's not straight, straighten it.
it didn't work.
Take your rock
Yes.
to bed. Leave me alone. I mean, if you're in a health relationship, you can say that. But like, if you don't like it, just fix it.
I will tell you this, though, from 7 to, because I'm sitting here thinking, you know what, I'm telling this story about, I have an opportunity. I take my health sabbatical, which really is medical disability, in 2007. And we're sitting here together in 2019. So part of the message that I don't want to miss in this conversation is that the healing takes a long time.
Yes, because I think we met in 2013, and you were still dealing with it. So
Absolutely. The healing takes a long time. And
Blonde.
and blonde, I was toying with my hair. Who knows what that was about? Just a box of hair dye one day. But in a culture that is microwaved, right? When a food comes fast and relationships come fast. Oh, think about this with social media, which I didn't grow up with, certainly. Everything moving fast. You can spin through that news feed so fast. Everything is instant.
Dating apps, you can.
I'm not sorry to tell you, because it's not really an apology. I just want your viewers and people touched by this to know that the healing simply takes time. But let me tell you, you're worth it. You're worth it. My aim, I was, like I said, 60 in April, so this is my Diamond Jubilee year. My aim is to celebrate the first 2/3 of my life, all right, in 30-year increments, and to look forward with positivity and joy and purpose and passion to another 30.
Yes.
So if I intend to live another 30, and I do, I don't mind that the healing is going to take that long. I understand that I've made real progress over the last 12 years or 20 or whatever. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2001. So a long time of that flare goes up, and I said, whoa, I now have a chronic pain disorder. I'm going to have to take better care of myself. So I'm worth it.
Did they tell you the fibromyalgia was because of trauma?
No, I learned that from, oh, good question. No, I learned that from, and I told you that Dr. Vander Kolk, that's Kolk, at the Trauma Center in Brookline, Mass. He has 30 years of experience in trauma research, has connected that. There's another terrific book I'll post on my site. If there are gaps in what we talk about, I'll do some work after the fact and post some titles that you should explore. Mind-body connection. I can't remember starts with an H, but it's not coming to me right now. The mind-body connection. There is real science. It's probably pretty leading edge. I don't think that there are a lot of people who are talking about it in the 70s and 80s, but by the mid-90s, when Tedeschi and Calhoun come out with defining and giving some parameters to the studies that they're doing on post-traumatic growth, they're also looking at the ways that the brain and body communicate trauma, and then potentially, if you don't heal it, it begins to work on your health.
Your organs.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the whole business of mourning a friend who, from depression, you'll say, well, the truth is, she died of a broken heart. That's real. That's very, very real. So you want to talk about Tedeschi and Calhoun? You ready?
Yes, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Lots of deep
I'm
breaths.
still like on my breakthrough right now. I got a lot of soul work to do. Because I'm like,
and
that
you're
makes
worth
sense. It's very hard for me to relax. And I'm like, that stems from somewhere.
Yes, it does.
And when you said that your therapist said, when did the abuse start? Was it at night when it happened? I was like, let me start thinking about when I started having.
Well, okay. Let me also blow your mind.
Okay.
Okay. Well, no, it's okay. You know a little bit about this because we've talked about trauma legacy.
Mm-hmm.
You might also be have a sensitivity to hypervigilance from something your mother or your grandmother experienced. Because now science, and this is really very leading edge, now science is documenting the fact that there truly is a family legacy of trauma, unhealed emotional trauma particularly, so that what happens is your mother goes through a traumatic experience and it changes her genetically. It will alter her gene.
DNA.
Yes. And then that altered genetic expression is carried on to the children and the grandchildren. There are some experiments early on. There's just not a lot of research to this date. There's some early on with children who were separated after World War II from their parents, children in European countries who had to be moved to safety in neutral countries, into Switzerland and Sweden, and there was a higher likelihood that those children having been separated from their parents, will pass on the trauma of that what the feelings of abandonment.
Now. Because I was trying not to share,
real.
but I can pinpoint where I think that my inability to relax and not feel safe. And I've been saying all the time, stability, safety, and peace is like what I strive to always have. My parents separated when I was 10. And my maternal grandmother, passed away when I was 12. I didn't know my dad's parents at all. They passed away before my parents met. I think when my dad was in his early 20s, they passed away. But they separated. My dad got stationed to another state, and he would come visit, every weekend, every other weekend. And then when I turned 12, my grandmother passed away later on that year. And my dad started not visiting as much. And then my mother, I think in her grief, that's why I attribute it to her grief. I rarely saw her. She just stopped being a mother. And that, I felt like I was an orphan because my dad wasn't there. And my mother, even though she was physically there, she wasn't there. And
your grandmother was gone?
Grandma was gone. My sister was there, but she's 6 years older than me, so she's doing, hanging out and stuff like that.
And she's processing emotionally as a 16, 17, 8-year-old, not as a 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And we shared a room before my grandmother passed, and after she passed, my sister took her room. I couldn't go, even though I know my grandmother loved me, I always felt like her spirit was still there, and I was like, she might do something. She was very, very quiet, but she liked to pick, practical jokes, kind of like.
Yes.
And I'm like that too. But I was like, I think she might hop out and tell her. And they was like, she would never do anything like that. She loves you. But
still
just
looking for her,
just
longing for her.
Yeah, but just to know her spirit was still there, I could not go to her room. I would cut across my room and go to the bathroom and lock the door. I could never, after she passed, go to her room or anywhere near it. But just my mother just shut down and stopped being a mom to me.
Yes.
And I told her years later, I felt abandoned. I felt like I was alone. And so I know she was in her grief. Like her marriage
that was the only way that she understood to cope at that point.
And she was doing activities that I did not know at the time that she had been doing. I just didn't see it or know of it. But to me, it was like brand new because she kept that away from me.
Yes.
So she was doing stuff where I was like, okay, I really don't feel safe. And my dad tells me stories like, no, she's been doing that. Like now that I'm older and I can have the conversations, he's like, yeah, when you was born, we had her out because of that. I was like, oh, okay. But
so there you are, at a very tender age, and you feel like emotionally the rug is pulled out. Well, several rugs pulled out from
I felt like I did not know what to do or where to go. Like there was food in the house and I had a roof over my head and safety, but I had nobody around me. And that continued until I went to college, until I met Larry. It was kind of like my mother was there, she would work, but I would rarely see her. And the only way I could see her is I had to go to her and peek, like, okay, you're home. Hey, talk. And then after I left, I didn't see her again. So
I'm sorry about that, but I'm glad for you to make that connection.
Yeah, I just never would have thought of that. Like, okay, that's part of my...
So I mentioned earlier about how this work will go on until you are no more, and who knows what happens after that, but at least until, I'm 90, 30 years from now, and so it goes on.
I got my 3, so it's going to continue.
But I think being aware of that, and knowing, that's why I responded in that way. You are better prepared to take very good care of yourself when you experience, God forbid, but that's the way life is, when there's another loss, or there's this sense of, I feel this creeping sense of abandonment, or whatever it is, you can say, wait, I'm fine. So what I want to be sure to leave you with, a message that I hope lingers beyond any of the other books and titles, and here's how there are 3 steps and 5 steps that we share. is that no matter how long it takes, do the work. You're worth it. Whatever you have survived at this point, you have survived. You're strong, you're brave, you're bold, you can do this. You've gotten to this point, and you're absolutely worth the work if it takes a week or 30 years, like it will in my case. You're worth it. Stick it out. Do the work. You're worth the effort. I want to talk about Tedeschi and Calhoun.
Yes.
And wrap up with so 5 areas of life. I've already mentioned in our talk about post-traumatic growth. These are 2 scientists who in the mid-90s define post-traumatic growth and suggest that the people who triumph over trauma and really turn things around begin, as we have and as people out there have and will continue to do, in talk therapy, talking through it, giving it the same experience that you are offering, you've described, working with children who were in domestic violence situations themselves, who need an opportunity to give voice to the feelings that were
just be
frightening.
kids that aren't in that situation.
Yes. One of the things that they suggest is that the critical piece of post-traumatic growth is that the progress is not rushed. So that's why I say if it takes a week or 30 years or the rest of your life, that's what it takes, and you're worth it. So the 5 areas of life, they measure real success, a sense of triumph. One of them is appreciation of life. And if you are you're out there and you are just coming out of a domestic violence situation, or you're at the end of your rope with one, it may be that your appreciation of life has been diminished in some way because you are just wrestling with the manipulation, in some cases, the aftermath of the physical assaults that you've endured. And it makes sense that on the other side of it, for people who are feeling more whole and safe and more of a sense of promise for the future, that there's a deeper appreciation for life. The other aspect of it is that they reconnect with others. The relationship with others, they say, is a critical
You get
part.
isolated often by your abuser, and so
Yes,
now you
exactly.
are free to be with those that love you.
Yeah,
reconnect.
there's parts of my story that you've heard for the first time, and I consider you a true friend and a very safe person to talk to. But that it's just very hard to do. So relating to others is a way of opening yourself up, of essentially experiencing the renewed sense of safety that you feel. New possibilities in life, that is sort of a given, isn't it? That you would look for new friendships, new work, even sometimes in some cases women relocating.
You have to.
Yes,
In a lot of cases.
a completely new way of life. Personal strength, meaning that instead of feeling personally diminished,
or feeling like it's your fault or you caused it, you're like, it didn't kill
Yes.
me, and if I can get through this, I can get through anything.
that's really good. I'm going to leave it at that. Perfect. And then spiritual change. They observe that in people who triumph, they either experience a renewed sense of faith, or they find faith in God, higher power, something like that, for the first time. And there is a real change. For me, the spiritual change has been that I am determined to continue to take really good care of myself and make sure that I am an example for my grandchildren, which leads us to transitional character. I love this part. So I'd shared this is so brand new, I brought it to Tricia this morning as we prepared to have this talk with you and share some findings with you. So a transitional character is one individual in a single generation who does this deep, difficult spiritual work to move past the trauma and heal. And with that forward movement and that healing, finds a different pathway, forges a different pathway for themselves and the children that follow. I aspire to be a transitional character. I would encourage you to do the same thing if you've had a similar experience and you are determined to be an example of post-traumatic growth, to use the methods in your own life, whether it's talk therapy or changing your personal health habits or meditation or whatever it is, that you would embrace the idea that you too could be a transitional character. There's a quote I always like to share with this that I think is so powerful by Real, who describes the transitional character in this way. Terry Real, R-E-A-L, if you want to Google it. So it says, family dysfunction rolls down from generation to generation like a fire in the woods, taking down everything in its path until one person in one generation has the courage to turn and face the flames. So powerful. That person brings peace to their ancestors and spares the children that follow. So it's a big, that's a monumental ask of someone, but I am asking it of myself, that I turn and face the flames from whatever happened before to me, my parents, my grandparents, one of whom I never knew. I'm going to make a difference in my life and in my daughter's life and in my grandchildren's lives. I'm going to be that transitional character.
I'm going to ask you this question, and I hope I don't throw you off. But have you seen with your daughter scenarios you went through and you've seen her go through it? And was it a result of you not talking to her about it or not thinking it was important enough to share? Because like I shared my story and my daughter went through something similar, but it was way different. And I was like, how I shared with her my story, that I don't think she would have, that would have happened the way that it did, because she would have been prepared.
That you would have offered her a cautionary tale.
Yeah, it would have been like, if he tests you like this, it's demanding, if he's manipulative, then just cut it off.
I'm not sure that's true. I'm sure you probably don't know whether or not it's true. It's just that as mothers, we would love to save our children from situations that are impossible. I think I could have been more forthcoming. I'm glad that you asked that, because I think I could have shared more. Here was my hesitation. I wanted to respect my daughter's autonomy and her opportunity to choose herself a relationship with her dad. So I did not berate him to her. I did not speak badly of him until she became an adult, and then she asked me, right, she said, what happened? But I really made a conscious effort. She was 8 when we split up. So, and again, that tender age where you were 10, 12, I wanted to respect who she was and the opportunity. I had such a wonderful, loving relationship with my dad. I thought she could have that. I had not. I felt that she was safe with him. He had never, he was manipulative with her. He was never going to turn that off. But he had a different dynamic with her.
And that was his.
Yes. They still have a relationship, and
that's one thing my mom said, is like, I chose a great father for you, but he was an awful husband. I was like, what am I supposed to do with that? But I'm just like my dad, so we get along phenomenal. But like I'll tell him stuff. He's like, I'll be thinking the same thing. I'm just like, well, what am I supposed to do with that information?
I wanted her
I'm
to
supposed
have
to be
that.
mad at him for being an awful husband. Like he's not my husband. He's a great daddy to me. So
I think I could have been more forthcoming. I just it didn't happen. I was just so careful not to belittle him to her that I would play, what if games with my children when they were really little. What if someone makes you feel uncomfortable? What if someone asks you to do, those sorts of things. But I don't know. I think we do the best we can to prepare our children, but I don't know that even your sharing would have, she was going to react the way that she was going to.
She knew the story because, like, me and my husband, we talked out in the open.
Yes.
And I've shared that story several times with him, and she'll hear. We talk real, So I know she was prepared.
Yes.
But I didn't say, like, even in a work situation, this happened. She did a summer job, and something almost awful happened, but it was awful for her because it changed her character. And now she's back to how she was. But I was scared for a few months. I was like, that's changed my baby. And I'm like, I was out for blood. I was just like, y'all are going to do something. But had I just said, like, even in friendships, even in organizations, if someone is being manipulative, then you just need to cut that off and you need to tell somebody. And I just felt like, because when in my relationship that I talked about, because I noticed it and I processed it, but I didn't say anything and I didn't do anything. I feel like that's a practice that I always do. It's like, I know you're lying. I know that you are, being manipulative, but I'm not going to say it out loud.
Well, I know that you prepared her well, and that even you. The issue is you can't make the choices for her. All you can do is offer up your love and protection, and I know you do. And perhaps think about it this way: perhaps it didn't escalate into something horrible. It was horrible enough. Maybe it didn't escalate into something horrible because you've been open and because you're watchful of your daughter and say, hey, is something going on?
It was just, it threw us for a loop because she was where she was supposed to be and doing what she was supposed to do, which is somebody awful was there too. So
think about the parents who deal with children who are assaulted at church
or at school,
assaulted at school, or
like where you're supposed to be. Yes. Yeah, you're where you're supposed to be, where other adults should be watching and doing their jobs, and they're not. So, okay.
So let's wrap with, because I know you love do three things that will change your life, or do these 5 things because it will make all the difference in the world. So
put
here,
things to practice.
Yeah, put things to practice. You're right. You're right again. So let me offer these 3 things that you could do as you finish this, and hopefully make a comment to my wonderful friend on our Facebook page or Instagram, or reach out to her via email, however you want to do that, to make a comment, because that will drive her audience, and that also inspires her to do more wonderful things like this. So there are 3 things. Invest in talk therapy. I know that you may be pinched, that you're seeing there, a lot of people are, and can't find the money to hire an expensive therapist. Reach out to someone you trust to talk to. Save the money for therapy. The talk therapy will save you. It's not just enough to talk to a friend who is a good listener, particularly if you can find a therapist who works and whose practice is centered around cognitive behavioral therapy. That's the therapy that works. I'll repeat it again. Cognitive behavioral therapy. That's what works. Step 2, she loves this part. That's 1. Step 2 is assess your diet and make the changes that you need to take care of your belly. That may sound crazy. It's like, I'm supposed to do what now? I'm supposed to, this is dietary. I can assure you that the very best practitioners in coaching and in therapy are suggesting that you pursue how your body processes food and shift to a mostly plant-based diet and supplements. It may sound like an odd conversation, but it doesn't, because it just loops back around to Dr. Vander Kalk and the body keeps the score, and there is a direct connection. We can get into the science in another conversation between your brain and your gut. So do the assessment. There's kind of an expensive one, $150, but it's at biome.com. They will measure your microbiomes in your digestive system and craft a plan for you. VIOME.com. Step number 3, find some sort of practice. Remember the part 5 that they were saying that there was spiritual change? Meditate. Meditation has changed my life. I had a pretty active prayer life, I still do, leading up to my extensive self-care period from like 06, 07 and on. But meditation is incredibly empowering. So that's the 3. Talk therapy. Get in touch with your diet and change the way you eat. You are, and it may sound old-fashioned, especially from this 60-year-old mouth, you are what you eat.
Yeah. I'm sweets and soda.
Yeah, and I am too. And sugar grows cancer.
It does,
and so no more. Both of my parents have passed now, and I miss them every day. Both of them had cancer. And I was fueling my way to work by in 2006 and 7 with Coca-Cola. There's a plug, but talk therapy. Find out about your diet and be good to yourself and your belly, and meditate. I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you so much.
Post-traumatic growth.
Post-traumatic growth.
I'm going to use
We're
that.
signing up. We're signing on. Thanks, everybody.
Thank